Hello, History 132 students. Hope all is well and everyone is remaining safe. Today we're going to talk about two chapters, chapter 24 and 25. And mainly we're going to talk about ideology. And, and the second portion of this lecture will deal with colonialism, particularly its effect on Africa and the rest of Europe. Um, if you've been following my lectures, we went through the Atlantic Revolution, the American Revolution, the French Revolution, and the Haitian Revolution. This led to the creation of the United States, led to the establishment of the first Black Republic in in the Americas. Uh, but the French Revolution went astray, and it took the rise of a military leader to bring peace, and that leader was Napoleon Bonaparte. He began to fight wars with his European neighbors. He uh, conquered Egypt. He goes into Asia. Napoleon. Now, because of his need for money, is the reason he would sell Louisiana to Thomas Jefferson in the United States, and of course, this would allow it to expand westward to across the Mississippi River to the Pacific Ocean. But let's get back to what we want to discuss today: ideology. I ask you, since we are in the middle of election season, what is your ideology? What do you believe in? What is your idea of government? Is it liberal, conservative, socialist, nationalist? Uh, what do you believe? What is your idea? Well, with the defeat of Napoleon in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon is exiled. He escaped. They catch him again and put him at St. Helena's. But anyway, the Congress of Vienna in 1815 was called to uh, uh, let's see, what's the reason? The purpose of the Congress was to assure a balance of power in Europe and settle international disputes and prevent future revolution. Basically, it was the way of putting Europe back together again after the invasion, the chaos of Napoleon. So at this conference, it was led by a man named Metternich, and he uh, had organized the Austrian, Persia, and Russia Holy Alliance, and of course against them was the Quadruple Alliance. We won't go into all the detail, but Metternich opposed nationalism, and he was an advocate for conservatism. Uh, let's see, can we get a definition for his brand of conservatism? Metternich believed that human nature was prone to errors, excess, and self-serving behavior, that strong government were needed to protect society from its worst instinct, to preserve, conserve, conservative, against change. On the opposite end, liberalism also rose during this conference. Uh, their classical liberalism uh, favors government programs to meet social needs and to regulate the economy. Now, again, I ask you, what are you? Are you liberal or conservative? In America, we basically have two political parties. One is a Republican Party, which is conservative, and the other is the Democratic Party, which is liberal. Now, liberalism means that you favor government intervention in the welfare, the going on of the country. Conservatives believe less government is best. So, all of these two philosophies rose up out of the Congress of Vienna. Now, also during this particular time, Scottish philosophy, Adam Smith, posits the idea of a free economy. He invented what we call capitalism, where price of goods and services are based upon the demand for those goods and services. Capitalism. Now, I assume most of us are capitalists in here. He argued for free trade, free laissez-faire. And of course, the third ideology to rise up, and this is real tricky here, nationalism. This is where one identified with the nation state. Now, take the example of Americans. We are a mixture of all groups of people, but we all consider ourselves to be American. We may be African American, Black American, Chinese American, Asian American, white American, European American, German American, Native Americans, Hispanic Americans, but we are all Americans. Now, if you're not aligned with the state, then you are tribalists with a group instead of with the state. But nationalism rose up during this particular time, and because of nationalism, let's see, I'm looking at your study guide, which I will load later. What did I say about nationalism? I guess I didn't. So, bear with me. Okay, so you have nationalism. The other ism we want to talk about today is socialism, the birth of socialism. It's a radical doctrine that formed after 1815, basically to support workers. And the concept is developed from the writing of Karl Marx. Marx had written in 1848 the Communist Manifesto. Now, don't confuse socialism with communism or Marxism. They're separate. Socialism, a good example of socialism is public school system. That's a socialist venture. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those are socialist ideas. In Europe, you have socialist countries that are still democracy. Now, you have communist countries who are not democracies like North Korea, China, and maybe Cuba. Those are the only three known communist countries today. But they consider themselves to be socialists. And you hear this argument in the present ongoing election cycle about he's a socialist. What does it mean to you? It basically means that one class had always exploited the others, and with the advent of modern industry and society, government had to intervene to maintain an equal footing for the bourgeoisie as well as the proletariat, the workers. So conservatism, liberalism, capitalism, nationalism, and socialism all developed during this time period between 1850 and 1850. But all is not well. Trouble breaks out in France in 1848, which leads to another revolution. Attempt to establish a monarch again was put down, but France was still unstable. Now, all of this is taking place in the middle of the Industrial Revolution, the advent of steam engine, locomotive engines, etc. But there was still conflict. And it also led, when we was talking about nationalism, to nation building. Eventually, the countries of Italy, Germany, and Russia would come together as one. Before, Italy is not a state until 1871. Garibaldi united the Italians, and Germany is not united until, although von Bismarck unite Prussia and East Saxon and form Germany. So they are late coming to the nationalization. But Bismarck unified Germany and was the leader. Now, modern Russia, I don't know what we can say about it. Peter the Great opened it up to the west. The western half identified with Europe. The eastern half was more Asiatic. But during this rise of this industrial revolution and advancement of economic development, social equality and class. We know all about social class, social division. But we also see a change in the family. Remember what I told you last week about the woman leaving the home, going into the workplace? It changes everything. We see an increase in divorce, out of wedlock birth, just a change in the family until the Victorian age come about and the woman is sent back to the home and to be led by a man. But they will not stay there permanently. This would eventually lead to the suffrage movement, which we're going to talk about later. But we also see cultural shifts in politics throughout Europe, and we see in America, though, an issue that it had to deal with. Since its beginning, it had been founded on systemic racism, 3/5 clause, remember that. Slavery was the driving economic engine of the Americas. Slavery built the country, like it built the White House. But this conflict led to America's growth with this institution, not conflict, the institution of slavery. With the opening of Louisiana and west of the colonies, developed a agricultural society called a plantation economy, and it was fueled by the importation and the trade and domestication of slaves, African slaves, and it created a very high level of living for those living in the South. We also see a rise in anti-Semitism, anti-Native American. We see the concept of manifest destiny develop, where it is decided that America would govern from the Atlantic to the Pacific. So America now is moving west and displacing Native Americans who had been here for thousands of years and commandeering their land and building plantation ranches and other land mass, taking their land. So all of that is going on, and in Europe, that's where the anti-Semitism is taking place. But in the Americas, the manifest destiny, it gets so bad that Andrew Jackson, after the Battle of Horseshoe Bend, by 1832, he's president. He removed the Native American from east of the Mississippi to the Indian Territory, the present day of Oklahoma, the state of Oklahoma. This is called the Trail of Tears. Many died along the way. Many slaves ran away and joined Maroon Society along the Chattahoochee River. That's the river that separates Georgia and Alabama. Eventually migrating to Apalachicola and eventually joined up with the Seminoles in the Everglades. Chief Osceola, the mascot of the Florida State Seminole, he comes out on his Appalachia pony and throws down his gauntlet. He is a black Seminole who was born in Macon County, Alabama. So, the Civil War is fought over the issue of slavery. Don't let anyone else tell you, without slavery in America, there would not have been a civil war. After the Civil War, millions of Africans now are emancipated, and this will lead to the period called the Reconstruction era, but these black males in particular, was given all of the rights, political rights, as white males between the period 1865 to 1875. But all of that changes with the troops being pulled out of the South. Now white conservative comes back and take control of southern states like Alabama. But now one of the reasons the troops were pulled out of the South was because the Republican Party at that time, the Radical Party or the Liberal Party, had grown tired of the problems in the South and wanted to expand. This led to the construction of the Transcontinental Railroad that connects the Atlantic Ocean to the Pacific via rail. Before that, you had to travel overland by wagon train or sail around the Atlantic Ocean down around the coast of South America up the Pacific to California. But now the Transcontinental Railroad is in existence. But in Europe, nationalism had taken hold, and now they look to expand. In fact, let's see, what did I say? Hegel, another one of the German philosophers, believed that great nations needed overseas colonies. And this led to what we call the scramble for Africa. In 1884, Otto von Bismarck called all of the European nations together, and this launched a scramble for Africa. And this began the colonization, where the Europeans took control of the African continent and its people and pillaged the wealth and brutalized the natives there. So the African continent was, besides the institution of slavery, which goes, the international trade goes all the way up to 1807 when Wilberforce, college named after him, passed a law in Britain outlawing the transatlantic slave trade. But slavery was full bore in the Americas by now. There was no need to continue to bring slaves from Africa. Yet, a captain in Mobile named Meir, he attempted to do this, and he went to Africa and brought back slaves on board of the Clotilda. That's a wonderful topic if you're looking for one. Brought it into Mobile Bay and burned the ship. This was the last slave ship, 1859, 2 years before the beginning of the Civil War, was the last slave ship to land in the Americas. But Bismarck launched the scramble for Africa. But what I most want to talk about is the Belgians. The Belgians went into the Congo and created and pillaged the Congo, that's Central Africa, and it left a lot to be decided as far as human migration, because I want you to hold on there 1 second. I want to talk about this period between 1880 and 1914, where African civilization was adversely affected by European imperialism. Imperialism means to expand the boundaries. So, Belgian King Leopold II. Look him up, Google him, King Leopold of Belgium. Look at the pictures. He really, what's the word that I want to use? Genocide. He committed genocide against the Belgian Congo inhabitant, black people. So we have the Jewish genocide, we have the Belgian genocide, we have other genocides in the world. But look up that, Belgium under King Leopold. Now, I say this to tell you that the same as in the Americas with the Spanish, the French, the Portuguese, and the British. You could tell where these European countries colonized the area by the language that the modern day people speak today. So you go, Nigeria was colonized by the British. They speak the King English. Cameroon was colonized by the French. They speak French. Angola was colonized by the Portuguese. They speak Portuguese. Ghana was colonized by the English. They speak English. So depending on the country, the Belgian, they speak German. So the influence of these colonies can be determined by the language that the modern day inhabitants of those countries speak today. Colonialism does not end. It coincides with the rise of the modern civil rights movement. So it really doesn't end until after World War II. And we will talk more about colonialism during this period as we progress. Now, here's what we got to do. I'm going to load your study guide, watch this lecture, and next Thursday, October the 15th, you will have your second test. Study your study guide. Use your study guide to prepare for test 2. If you have any questions or problems, feel free to call me or send me an email or text. Be blessed and stay safe. Caver out.